There are basketball games, and then there are basketball games. The kind that get talked about for years, referenced in conversations about greatness, pulled up as evidence whenever someone tries to argue that a player doesn't have what it takes. What unfolded between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky on a charged night at Gainbridge Fieldhouse was unmistakably the latter. When the final buzzer sounded on a 114-106 Indiana overtime victory, two names were etched permanently into the WNBA record books in a way that had never happened before in the league's entire history. Clark and Aliyah Boston each recorded 30-point double-doubles in the same game, a feat no pair of teammates had ever accomplished in a single WNBA contest. But if you think the final score tells the whole story, you haven't been paying attention. To fully appreciate what Clark delivered on this night, you need to understand the mountain of expectations, setbacks, and scrutiny she had been carrying on her shoulders since the moment the 2025 season began. The 2025 campaign was supposed to be her breakout year. The hype machine was fully operational, the cameras were everywhere, and the basketball world was ready to watch her take the WNBA by storm. Instead, injuries had other plans. Clark played just 13 games before the season was over, a cruel and abrupt end to a year that was supposed to define her trajectory. All that momentum, all those expectations, gone before summer ended. When 2026 arrived, the pressure was of an entirely different variety. This wasn't the excitement of a rookie making her debut or a second-year player proving her staying power. This was a player who had been denied her moment, given a second shot, and now had everything to prove all over again. Redemption seasons carry a unique kind of psychological weight, and Clark felt every ounce of it from the opening week. Indiana's season opener ended in a loss, and the skeptics immediately found their rhythm, but Clark silenced them quickly. She torched the LA Sparks in Indiana's first road win of the season, looking every bit the transformative force the league had been anticipating. Against Seattle, she was unstoppable. 21 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds in just 23 minutes before head coach Stephanie White pulled her from the floor. The stat line earned her a place in the record books. 12 career games with at least 20 points and 10 assists, the most in WNBA history. No one else had done it. Then came the back injury against Golden State at home. The basketball world collectively held its breath. Clark returned, dominated, and put the injury fears to rest. But the road trip to face Golden State told a different story. Clark stood wide open for a full second, arms extended, waiting for a pass that never came. Indiana lost by 2, and the cracks in this team's foundation became visible to everyone watching. Nothing in Indiana's early season turbulence generated more noise than what happened in Portland. The Fever were playing the expansion Portland Fire, a game they were fully expected to win. With 6.5 minutes still on the clock in the first quarter and Indiana actually leading, Stephanie White made the decision to pull Clark, Boston, and Hull off the floor simultaneously. The result was catastrophic. Portland ended the quarter on a ferocious run, and by the time the buzzer sounded, the Fire led 29-15. Indiana never recovered and dropped the game by 16 points. Clark played just 22 minutes after accumulating 5 fouls, but the number that mattered more to the media wasn't on any box score. It was the footage. Cameras captured Clark and White in a heated sideline exchange. Voices raised, body language tense, competitive frustration spilling over in full view of everyone in the arena and everyone watching at home. White called Raven Johnson
Jason Whitlock went on air claiming the Fever were looking to move Clark to the LA Sparks. He called White crazy and said
over and substituted Clark out almost immediately after. Within hours, the clip had spread everywhere. Sports media ran with it at full speed. Jason Whitlock went on air suggesting the Fever were exploring a trade that would send Clark to the LA Sparks, calling White's coaching decisions reckless and claiming the locker room was fractured beyond repair. Speculation multiplied overnight. Reports circulated that Clark was unhappy with her usage, that the coaching staff was suppressing her ceiling, that this team was coming apart at the seams. Here's the thing worth noting, none of it was ever confirmed. Clark addressed it publicly and expressed confusion that the story still had legs. White pushed back on every claim and maintained it was simply coaching. Both insisted there was no real divide, just two fiercely competitive people who refused to accept losing. But in the modern media environment, nuance rarely travels as fast as a viral clip, and the damage to the public narrative was already done. If Portland was embarrassing, New York was gut-wrenching. Indiana led the Liberty by 12 points in the fourth quarter. They were executing, controlling tempo, and looked like a team that had finally found its footing after weeks of turbulence. Then the Liberty dismantled them with ruthless efficiency. They exposed Indiana's free throw shooting, shredded the defense, and erased the entire lead. Final score, Liberty 83, Fever 75. The criticism that followed reached a new peak. Indiana couldn't close games. Clark didn't show up when it mattered most. The coaching was preventing this roster from reaching its potential. The record sat at 5 wins and 5 losses, and the season felt like it was tilting toward irrelevance. But rather than retreat into the noise, Clark delivered a response that mattered. Indiana beat Atlanta in a gritty win that challenged every narrative about her clutch performance. Then against Washington, she hit a 31-foot buzzer-beater 3 that sent the arena into a frenzy, and instantly became one of the defining shots of the entire WNBA season. In that same game, Aliyah Boston quietly made history of her own, becoming the fastest center in league history to reach 400 career assists, a milestone that speaks to how completely her game had evolved beyond traditional post play into something far more complete and dynamic. Back-to-back wins. Confidence building, and then Chicago came to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Over 15,000 fans filed into Gainbridge Fieldhouse for what most expected to be a comfortable Indiana home win. The Fever came out looking like a completely different team from the one that had been struggling to find itself for weeks. Clark was in attack mode from the opening possession, driving baselines, pulling up in the mid-range, drawing contact, and getting to the line repeatedly. Indiana outscored Chicago 27-14 in the first quarter and built a lead that swelled to 19 points in the first half. A blowout felt like it was brewing. Then Chicago reached into their bench and pulled out something nobody was remotely prepared for. Sydney Taylor, an undrafted rookie guard who most fans had never heard of, started knocking down shots. Then she kept knocking them down. Then she simply refused to stop. The Sky closed the first half on a devastating 14-2 run, cutting Indiana's comfortable lead to just 6 at halftime. The crowd that had been celebrating just minutes earlier suddenly felt the unease creeping in. What came next in the third quarter was the kind of explosion that reshapes a game entirely. Chicago scored 39 points in a single quarter. Taylor was completely unconscious, draining shots with the composure and rhythm of a seasoned veteran, not an undrafted rookie playing early professional basketball. She connected on 9 of her first 10 field goal attempts, buried all 3 of her three-point tries, and finished the night with 30 points on shooting efficiency that bordered on historic, a true shooting percentage above 90% off the bench. Skylar Diggins was operating in the mid-range with the craftiness and footwork that has defined her career for over a decade. Alyssa Thomas was punishing Indiana on the offensive glass, generating second and third chance opportunities that Indiana's interior defense simply could not contain. Chicago's lead ballooned to 11 points, and the game began to feel eerily familiar. This was the Liberty collapse playing out in real time, a fast start, a complete unraveling, and no apparent answer in sight. Adding another layer of volatility, both Clark and White picked up technical fouls within 2 minutes of each other. Whatever tension had existed since Portland clearly hadn't fully evaporated, and watching an 11-point lead become an 11-point deficit was pushing both of them to their edge. Indiana entered the fourth quarter trailing and looking for anything that might shift the momentum back. What Indiana produced in the fourth quarter was the kind of response that separates teams with genuine championship character from those that simply look the part. The Fever outscored Chicago 25-9 over those final 12 minutes. Clark completely abandoned the three-point shot that had been failing her all night, just one of 6 from beyond the arc, and drove directly at the basket on virtually every possession. She initiated contact, drew fouls, and got to the free throw line repeatedly, converting with calm mechanical precision. Boston was a force of nature in the post, punishing Chicago's frontcourt with a physicality and aggression they had absolutely no answer for. The deficit shrank from 11 to 8, then to 5, then to 3. Gainbridge Fieldhouse came back to life with a roar. With 18 seconds remaining, Clark stepped to the free throw line and calmly buried 2 free throws to push Indiana's lead to 5. The comeback felt complete. The game felt sealed. Then Indiana turned the ball over on the inbounds play with 5.1 seconds left. Skylar Diggins collected the loose ball, took 2 hard dribbles, and launched a three-pointer from well beyond the arc. The shot rose through the air as 15,000 people stopped breathing. It went in, tied at 98, overtime. The silence that fell over that building in the seconds after the shot went in was total and absolute. 5 seconds earlier, Indiana had the game. Now they were heading to an extra period against a Chicago team riding the emotional peak of one of the most stunning individual plays imaginable. Caitlin Clark had been quietly preparing for this moment for the entire game, even if nobody realized it. With her three-point shot completely unreliable, 1 of 6 on the night, Clark had been methodically establishing her identity at the free throw line. In overtime, she turned that into something that will be discussed for as long as people talk about this era of WNBA basketball. 15 free throw attempts, 15 makes. Perfect. Not a single miss with the game on the line, the crowd barely breathing, and a Chicago team still buzzing from one of the most dramatic moments of the entire season. She became just the 4th player in WNBA history to shoot 100% from the free throw line on 15 or more attempts in a single game. The names ahead of her on that exclusive list, Elena Del Don, who accomplished it twice, Whitney Sykes and Angel McCautry, represent some of the finest shooting performances in the history of the sport. Clark now belongs in that company. On the other end, Chicago disintegrated. The Sky shot just 1 of 8 from the field in the entire overtime
and attacked the free throw line like her legacy depended on it. 15 attempts, 15 makes.
All the momentum from Diggins' miraculous game, tying 3 drained out of them, the instant the extra period began. Indiana's defense locked down with an intensity that had been absent for much of the second half. Boston controlled the glass, Clark converted every single trip to the charity stripe, and Indiana made their first 23 free throws of the entire game before registering their first miss with just 46 seconds left. By that point, it was simply a formality. When the final buzzer ended Indiana's 114-106 overtime victory, the numbers told the full story of what had just happened. Clark finished with 32 points on 8 of 18 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, 15 of 15 from the free throw line, 10 assists and 7 rebounds. Boston finished with 34 points on 13 of 26 shooting, 2 of 5 from 3, 6 of 6 from the line, 12 rebounds and 4 blocks. Together, they became the first pair of teammates in WNBA history to each record a 30-point double-double in the same game. The supporting cast delivered exactly what was needed. Kelsey Mitchell added 19 points and 3 steals off the bench. Lexi Hull hauled down 7 offensive rebounds from the wing, the kind of relentless, unglamorous effort that never makes highlight packages, but fundamentally alters the math of a basketball game. Maisha Hins Allen posted the highest plus-minus rating of any player on either roster despite scoring just 5 points. Her 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and suffocating defensive energy gave Indiana everything they needed from their backup big. Boston's 2026 season deserves special mention here. She is averaging career highs across nearly every statistical category. Her three-point shooting has climbed to nearly 42%, a figure that forces defenses to guard her on the perimeter while she continues to dominate in the post. She is no longer simply a skilled interior player. She has become a complete offensive threat, capable of hurting opponents from every area of the floor. Indiana moved to 8 wins and 5 losses with this victory, riding 3 consecutive wins and carrying genuine momentum into a matchup with the Connecticut Sun. But the significance of this night went far beyond a regular season record or a spot in the standings. The weeks leading into this game had been defined by coaching controversies, trade rumors, questions about Clark's clutch performance, and doubts about whether this team had the depth or resilience to compete with the league's best. Every single one of those narratives was rendered irrelevant by what happened on this floor. Erasing an 11-point third-quarter deficit against a hot team, surviving a devastating game tying 3 with 5 seconds left, and then methodically dismantling Chicago in overtime isn't just a win. It's a statement about character. It's evidence of something that can't be manufactured by talent alone. Clark's free throw performance in overtime wasn't simply clutch shooting. It was historic pressure execution in the company of some of the greatest shooters this league has ever seen. Boston's 34-point, 12-rebound effort wasn't just impressive. By almost any measure, it stands as the finest individual performance of her professional career. Nobody is asking questions about this team's legitimacy tonight. And if you've been watching closely, you already knew this moment was coming.